Hello, everyone. This is StrawberryShorty here with the final episode of the Santa Clauses Season 2, Episode 12, Wonga Bonga Longa. That is a weird title. Anyway, when we left off, Betty finally told Scott what happened with Mad Santa. Buddy got turned into a nutcracker, and Scott and Carol are heading to Earth to save him, leaving Sandra and La Befana to protect the North Pole. How on earth is this going to end, and will we be getting a third season? Let's find out. Everyone is freaked out at the North Pole, trying to figure out if Scott and Carol are safe. Betty is rightfully creeped out by her head on the stick, but refuses to act as a leader because technicalities. Not like this is an emergency or anything. So Noel is still in charge. Scott and Carol did in fact arrive at Santopolis safely, and they find Buddy and Fluffy. Somehow, Fluffy seems to sleep through Carol freaking out over the state her son is in, and the whole moment actually feels pretty dark. Scott wakes up Fluffy, who is revealed to have seen that part with the canoe from the first movie. He was watching it as a little kid. Fluffy is thrilled to see the real Santa, and reveals Mrs. Claus was his first crush. Not sure how that works. Anyway, he takes them to a spare sleigh that they might be able to use and gives them some reindeer so they can get back to the North Pole and see if La Befana can help Buddy. Back in the control room, Noel asks Betty to leave with the other elves as none of them are safe and she has the biggest target on her back. Santa turns some semi-plastic reindeer into semi-alive ones, which is a little creepy. Fluffy wants to go with them, and despite the risk, he easily convinces them to allow it. Betty leads the other elves away, but realizes none of the others are safe as long as she's around. She decides to go off on her own to finish something she started 700 years ago, leaving Edie in charge. That can't be good, though I'm realizing she's a good match for Gary. Back in the sleigh, Fluffy is loving the sights, while Carol is regretting having left Sandra behind. Noel prepares for what's coming, while MS heads to the North Pole with Olga. Olga summons the gnomes, but MS just wants to get his amulet. He also gives Olga an axe to use against Betty. Is this a kid's show or not? Anyway, Scott and Carol manage to reach La Befana and Sandra and tell them the situation. Someone besides me finally calls him Buddy, too. Unfortunately, La Befana cannot undo MS's spell. Meanwhile, Fluffy seems to know who she is, maybe some famous foreign figure. La Befana thinks Sandra can fix her brother because she's more powerful, because, that's been going so well with the Easter Bunny. And La Befana wants her to take the magic from the Mad Santa's amulet, but she's unsure what exactly it is. Carol leads the charge, wanting her son back to normal. MS finally manages to breach the workshop, which has been left completely abandoned. I thought Sandra and La Befana were supposed to be looking out for it. And Santa is able to sense that he's close. He sends the girls off in search of the amulet while he goes to get dressed, because, priorities. And Fluffy basically just fangirls over the North Pole, but let's be real, we all probably would. Olga confronts Betty, who has a toy sword. The girls start to fight, but sadly it cuts away pretty much immediately. Instead, we get to see Santa confronting Mad Santa. And why does he have the Nutcracker with him? Shouldn't Buddy have been left with Carol or La Befana? Anyway, they argue over who the real Santa is. Before we get back to Olga and Betty fighting for about 2 seconds. Because wouldn't you rather watch MS and Santa arguing over office decor? We do finally get to see the girls kicking some butt, and then cut away again to the search for the amulet. I'm going to try and include as much of the fight scene as I can because I think it's kind of, fascinating. Probably technically the best part of the episode, just seeing these two childlike girls kicking butt. Sandra senses something, and then we get back to the Santas doing whatever the heck they're doing instead of actually fighting. MS gets the Buddy Nutcracker, which is exactly why he shouldn't have been there. And it turns out Scott gets weaker as Mad Santa gets stronger. Despite that, Scott gets the Nutcracker back easily enough, and we briefly get the girls fighting again. In the middle of their fight, they end up falling through the ice, which, the design of the North Pole should really be a little bit more sturdy, and they end up somewhere, which rewatching I think is actually supposed to be the workshop. Like, again, how does that happen? Is the roof just ice that can easily cave in? Anyway, back to the Santas. The gnomes arrive, but it turns out that they're there to help Scott. Noel suddenly got smart and approached them to form an alliance. We see him giving a speech that I bet the Betty Head on a Stick wrote for him. And, well, it works. I don't really get it why they're so quick to change sides, but whatever. Anyway, Scott's proud and Mad Santa is less than thrilled. Meanwhile, the trace that Carol and Sandra were following vanishes, but they figure out what the Mad Santa's amulet is. His mug, apparently. I'm not sure why we're calling it an amulet, but whatever. Anyway, turns out that this mug is the same mug that's been featured all throughout the movies and the TV series. The one that Judy first brought Scott Cocoa in when he first arrived at the North Pole. Ain't that a twist? He gets the Nutcracker back thanks to that, and Carol and Sandra arrive, as does La Befana. Elsewhere, the girls come to and begin wandering the workshop. Olga is amazed by everything. And Betty ends up telling her that she can make toys too. Apparently, gnomes have actually been trying to make toys for years, but whenever they try to make things that are fun, they end up making something that's useful. Which, strange gnome lore there. I'm sorry for all the weird pauses, but I had to redo the settings for the recording software, and because it keeps minimizing to the side, it's a real pain to get it to actually pause. I'm going to have to change that when this is done. I meant to do it after recording the last episode, which I did right before this. Anyway, back to the Santas. They're still wording it out. Mad Santa confronts Scott about not knowing what his son really wanted, despite supposedly knowing what everyone wants. Revealing Buddy just wanted to be a kid. He accuses him of failing his son and insists he won't make such human mistakes. Scott is actually not shaken by this, which is a surprise. He comes up with the idea of Sandra tapping into everyone's Christmas spirit. The two face off in a super underwhelming way, but shout out to Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers by Fluffy. Sandra succeeds, and the good guys grab the mug. MS takes it in more stride than expected, and Buddy is returned to normal. Scott decides not to turn MS into a nutcracker again, but thinks he made a good point about his relationship with Buddy. He thinks there's good in the Mad Santa. And Betty continues to craft, warheads or something with Olga. She's trying to help her make something fun, and thanks to her efforts, Olga ends up making what I can only call a Rubik's Cube toaster, which, I think someone would buy it. They bond over being formidable people working for, well, less formidable people. You know how it is. So, anyway, suddenly Mad Santa is in jail, having put himself there so he won't hurt anyone else. Him and Santa have another heart-to-heart, and I'm just wondering what happened to the last one that they just had 2 seconds ago. Anyway, Mad Santa admits he enjoyed being at Santopolis, and Fluffy reveals he liked having him there. I'm not sure why, considering all the stuff that the dude supposedly did off camera. He suggests they be partners. Afterwards, Scott has a present for Buddy, and it's totally going to be Riley, isn't it? Scott has given him a nice tux and turned the workshop into the prom he would have been at if he was just a normal kid. And yep, there's Riley. Also, Edie is suddenly a pop star. Scott talks about letting Buddy be a normal kid, making his own decision about whether or not he wants to be Santa farther down the line. And Mad Santa is also revealed to be at the party. And Olga gives him a gift. It is a very colorful shoehorn intended to be a parting gift. Mad Santa is sad she isn't coming with him, but Olga has realized that they bring out the worst, most toxic sides of each other, and they still manage to part on friendly terms, which it's nice to see shows acknowledging that friendships, even if two people like one another, can still be toxic. Anyway, Fluffy is loving all the elves and gets a big kick out of dancing with them. I still think he's going to turn out to be I think this is maybe a setup for a third season, because there's no way they're not intending for him to be the next Santa. Anyway, Carol admits to having made mistakes with Sandra, just as Scott did with Buddy. La Befana rejects Scott's offer to be reinstated as a legendary figure, though I'd like to see that get followed up on, because seriously, they did nothing. Oh, also, it's revealed Sandra managed to fix the Easter Bunny. Scott and Carol leave the party to meet with Betty and Noel. Betty reveals that she has to go back to Cribble Crabble, turning down Scott's offer to change the roles for her. We're bad-mouthing trolls instead of gnomes now. Anyway, Betty admits that she found the world fascinating, but kind of lacking. And Scott makes it so she can take Noel with her for their long overdue honeymoon. It's also revealed that both Bernard and Curtis never came back from their Cribble Crabbles. We learned what happened to Bernard, but what the heck happened with Curtis? Anyway, Scott and Carol tearfully bid them farewell, and then we cut to 7 months later. Mad Santa is enjoying himself on stage at Santopolis with Fluffy, while Scott and Carol are watching in the audience with the kids. Betty and Noel are enjoying food elsewhere, and the Calvin family begins doing the Christmas rounds on the sleigh. And that's where this season ends. I already said this, but I'm still really surprised they never did anything with Fluffy becoming the next Santa, but I'm still utterly convinced that that's the plan. So I didn't think it was a bad final episode, though I'm not sure how I feel about the season overall. I did like the stuff with Betty and Olga, mostly them fighting. Like, that was pretty cool. I don't know why we're not training all of the elves how to fight, but what about you all? What did you think? Let me know in the comments. Also, tell me if there's a third season. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!